Good morning, everybody. I hope you are having a wonderful morning today. I think this is the last Thursday of February. So I know I'm ready for spring, and I bet a lot of people are. And today, this is our Ask Me Anything with DeAnna Batdorff. I am Andrea Foster, her trusty sidekick, and we will be answering questions that you submit here on our live chat. And we've also got some questions that have come through during the week. So this is, if you're coming in late or if you're not sure how to send us messages, you can always send me an email at info@deannacenter.com. You can post on our Facebook page. You can post on our Instagram page. We do try to address every question that comes through to us on the chat. Sometimes we run out of time, but I always write them down. And in fact, the first question that we have came from last week. But DeAnna, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I just did a beautiful Instagram. Some of you may have been there and then swapped on over here with me. I just finished with Elise from Oshala Farm, and dear friend, amazing farmer, really ethical. And we were talking about local and global medicine, plant medicine, and just what does it all mean? And we just had a beautiful back and forth riff. You know what I mean? We just kind of went back and forth and fed off each other, which is what we easily do when we're together. So it was fun to do it there. And you can watch it on Instagram. And, it was a great conversation. So
It was.
I'm ready for more. I'm wide awake. I have my health. I have, the beautiful skylight bringing light down from above. And that's where I will also, pull all this information. I'll pull it from, times before me. Like, let's remember, I don't own any of this medicine. Nobody owns any of these theories. This is the elements, and it's plants that grow on the earth. And they're, people have figured a lot of the stuff I'm going to answer the questions with. Let's remember how many people before us figured those answers out. So now we're in the remembering and pulling those traditions back and holding on to them. And we're needing to also prove them. We're needing to, show, since we've lost them a little, we got to prove them, So anything I suggest today, remember to give it a good 10 days, unless it's hurting you, and something's not right, give it a good 10 days and let there be an incentive program to see if things are changing or not. And that's how you're going to know when something's working, and you're going to trust yourself, and you're going to trust your medicine and your choices more, the more you see things work. I think that's an important thing, right? I don't want to just be talking plants. Oh, do this. Oh, do that. It's like, well, we have to do them for a while and follow through to see change. And we also, have to see that they really, truly did affect us in a good way. And then they're your friends forever. Then you got tools. Now I got hundreds, thousands of tools and plants in my toolbox because, I've worked and offered them and seen them do their magic, their chemistry magic for years and years now. And it's really given me a different confidence to be like, yeah, this might really work for that. So hopefully my advice goes a long way for everyone today.
That is great. Thank you. Well, Martha's here. She followed us over from Instagram. She's saying hi from Texas, so I hope she's safe and warm. But let's jump into our first question. It is a holdover from last week from our dear friend Chris, and she asks you to speak a bit to the emotional aspects of breast issues.
Okay. Ooh, Chris. Good one. This is juicy. I like this question. Yeah, so what I guess I first think of, because it brings up a few different things, and it's a great, thing to be considering, is our breasts, our chests, our nipples, our areola, this whole region, right, is at the heart chakra. So the first thing I think of is we we have this extension of ourselves, whether that be our nipples extending out in beyond our skin, or whether that be somebody who has, breasts, or tissue in their chest that's out in the world. So this is an extension out into the world, and it's around our heart chakra. So I often think of, first off, how do you move your body? Because, our first experience that makes emotional patterns or would give us an emotional conversation is first going to be, what space are we talking about? Heart. And then are we hiding? And that's going to make a blocked heart. If our posture goes in, we're blocked. And what about somebody who more needs to be seen in this space? And so they're really more out, and it's what we call vulnerable chakra, heart chakra, but it's really, I find being blocked is vulnerable too. So I always say blocked and exposed. So there's the, how is somebody extending themselves out and exposing that space, showing that they're not safe? And then how much is their protection in a blockage? And maybe the shoulders are rolling down and somebody who's trying to hide that space. And so I always like to explain to people that hey, just keep in mind that if you're upright, and if you're in your embodiment, and if you're stable and feeling like you're connected to you don't have to be perfect to be connected to just, this is me right now. That up and right and kind of stable posture is really the safest place to be. So I'm often saying to people when I'm in front of them, I'll put myself in that structure and I'll be like, I'm just as safe like this as I am like this, because this is a false safety and I'm not actually any safer, and I'm probably not going to make any decisions here. But here I can have my yeses and my nos, and I can still be totally aware of what I need to do and what are my boundaries and how am I holding myself. So I think of posture, and I think of this whole blocked or exposed and vulnerable around heart. And let's remember, heart isn't just love interest, even though it is love interest. It's self-love, right? It's self-respect. And I think, what really is love? Everyone has to kind of get a sense of what is the foundations of love for you? It's a good question. And this is a good month to do it, right? Because it's the, love month, February. And so just where do you sit with that? Because somebody might not be loving themselves, and so they're trying to hide their breasts or their chest, and then somebody else might not feel loved enough, and so they really want attention, and so they're out there with their breast or their chest. And so I always think about safety and self-respect and self-preservation. Loving myself means I have to preserve myself so I can stay around. I'm going to have to give some attention to me to give attention to anyone else. And so these are the things I think of just around posture and that connection to these are little antennas in the world, honestly, and everyone has those, well, not everyone, but most people have nipples, and they really are sensory. They're sensory. So we have a strong sense of our heart's respect line or our preservation or our love. We have a sense of this. And that's why, there is sensitivity and reactions that happen with our nipples. And then there's a whole other thing that brings up breasts, right? And nipples, which is they feel good. They're tantalizing. They're stimulating. They, get erect and they get, excited, and they're connected to reproductive. So our intimacy and our wanting to share and touch and feel, and it juices us up, and this is a beautiful thing. I don't know why we skip around the conversations of pleasure so much. I'm like, man, that feels good, with myself or with someone else. That feels good if it's safe and connected. And it starts feeling good. And let's just be honest, it makes it juicy. Everything gets all juicy and ripe and ready to meet the world in bigger, intimate ways. So there's a lot to be said for okay, what's the emotion behind breasts? I think of Well, where's your level of pleasure? Or are you lonely? And that's a hard thing to look at because it's not something you can always just change, you know? And what has that been looking like with relationships and partnerships? Or are you even comfortable with yourself and being intimate with yourself, you know, and connecting these reproductive parts? Our breasts, our chest are secondary to our reproductive. So they're directly related. And then there's hormones, which is all the things that allow us to sleep and calm down, and all the things that allow us to wake up and be raring to go. And so there's a lot of the like, how are these ups and downs and how are these working together? Our root with our heart is what I think of in chakras, our root with our heart. And, you know, you got to be stable in your root to be able to feed that juice up and really meet the world, you know, at our heart. You know, it takes a lot of safety and boundaries to hold that. So these are some of the things I think of. There's another thing I'll just throw in there that's sweet here, but you know, if we didn't just look at breasts and reproductive, root and heart, we could say, well, let's remember that we literally have our heart hanging right here, and we have our lungs through here too. So let's just remember what's behind that chest cavity, right? And our heart is the emotion of envy. Now they say love, but they also say envy, you know, and it's really when you're not just loving what you have or who you are, you're wanting something, you know, outside of yourself. And that's why envy is the other side of love in Ayurveda. And then in Tibetan medicine, I don't remember Chinese right now off the top of my head. It's secondary medicine for me, but Tibetan, the heart is attachment and it's connected to the lymph. And your lymph system is also the system of attachment and security. So they look at it that way. And then the lungs are grief. And then they talk about like, well, you have two lungs. So you have your masculine right side, you have your right lung, which is grief in the masculine. And then you have the left lung, which is grief in the feminine. And so they will say like, oh, you know, they found more, you know, plaque in your right lung. And then they would know that, you know, however that plaque got in there, maybe it was just somebody was smoking a lot, or, you know, or like if you got a whole bunch of fire smoke in your body, why did one lung get affected and not the other? When it went through both nostrils and went to both lungs, why is one affected and one's not? And that's when we start having these bigger questions of like the heart is on the feminine side, and then you have your left lung, and then you have your, you know, right. So I think those are just some, that's a big question because it's not like breasts are this emotion. So I had to relate it to like breasts are where in the body. And then what are they also connected to? Root and reproductive. And then what organs are behind that tissue? And so these are all the different ways now, not to be like, well, which one do I pick now? Well, I'd say go to your heart. I'd say everybody, if that was a lot of different options, now you got to look at those options and be like, is it my heart? Is it my lung? Is it my heart chakra? You know, oh, it's my heart chakra. Okay. Is it vulnerable or is it blocked? You know, just let yourself go through the equation of which one of those really rung true when I said it. Right. I was just with, you know, Elise Oshala Farm. And one of the things I said is like, you know, you put medicine in your hand, you got to feel it. It's got to feel good. Then you say yes. You know, even if you're not exactly sure what organic means from the middle of Tunisia, you know what I mean? Like you still I have to get a yes. If I get a blah or if I get a no, that's the answer. If I get a yes, I want to trust my yeses as much as my no's. And so how do you use your instincts in that way? And that would be how you'd answer this question if that was a lot of options. Just like, which one of those rung true to you? You know, and Chris, I know you. So the one I said first was the one that I kind of felt was the answer to you because I know you, you know? And so I did speak to what my intuition, you know, because I could just see you right now, Chris, being all, what's your instinct though, Dee? What's your instinct? My instinct is heart chakra. And there's something that is actually, I'm just having an intuitive moment. there's something that is going blocked and exposed and going blocked and exposed. And there's not like a middle ground or some middle ground for you. So now I'm just taking a moment to speak to Chris because I was feeling it, and I appreciate her in my life. That was a good question to ask. Yeah. Okay,
Great.
what's our next question?
Thank you. So the next question came from a viewer wondering about nasal dryness, especially between the roof of the mouth and nasal passage. They use a neti pot through the nose and into the mouth twice a day, and that can bring relief. And then they experimented with coconut oil nausea all the way back there, but still is waking up in the middle of the night from intense painful dryness. And so at this point, when that happens, they get up and have some warm water. It sounds like they live in Colorado at this time of year, and we're talking elevation and it's cold. So wondering about your advice for relief.
Okay, well, you're already doing some really good starters. So that's really great that, you're in a zone. So we're not going to take out the neti pot. We're going to add things in. We're going to make a little system, right? That's going to hit this situation in a few different directions. And that's what I think it's going to take. You're also already doing a nausea oil. That sounds like it's based in coconut. So one of the things, I have a couple more suggestions, and then I have a wondering about well, let me start here. I have a wondering about where this is coming from. It really could be cold and brittle and dry, and this is what happens. But I do want to give just a couple other options on how this raw, painful could happen. One would be allergies. So I'm just curious, and it could be food allergy, but it's probably more airborne. Could be dander, could be dust, but probably a pollen. So I'm just curious, if that's part of it, and that would just change maybe the plants you would put into your nausea oil, or the plants we would add to the neti pot. Okay. So that's one of the main reasons I sell it's from the Baraka company, but I'm the formulator of the Baraka nasal rinse salt. So it's the salt rinse. And Scott, my partner, is the one who makes all that medicine, makes the formula for them, but I am the formulator, and it was made for people with low-grade allergies or something is even a low-grade infection. Now that's a big word, but that's another reason why this might be happening. It's just a really low-grade infection, and that could be from mold, or that could be from like pollution that's trapped up in there. There's different reasons that things would flare. And so really you'd want to be treating it in that way. But these are some of the concepts. Now, let's say you're just the simplest of ones and you're just dry. You're just like, I am too cold. I'm too dry. It's just getting up in there and it's not healing. Well, you're going to up your nausea oil. So if you're using a couple drops, or if you're using the dropper, that dropper is just going up and then down, and then you're swallowing it usually and getting just a little bit back in here, but you're mostly swallowing that. So I want to just give everybody a 101. How do you do a nausea snort? Keyword, snort. Yes, I'm teaching you to snort oil. Hang in there with me because it works. So you're going to put about a little teaspoon of oil in your hand, because when you do the dropper, you're bypassing this upward, and you're going to, no joke. See, I really did it like I do it in the morning. I'm not afraid. I do this all the time. Look how easy it is for me. I'm just all like total pretending this is awesome. Put your oil in this hand, same. Some nostrils are going to be more congested. One's always a little more than the other. Open it. Then I want to feel that oil get all the way up into the lymph in my brain and up in through to the 12 cranial nerves around my eyes And I want to then be able to snort it so it gets all the way back into your sinuses versus the back of my throat. And then you're getting oil that's deeper into your channels, way absorbable. So it's not like you're going to do too much, you know? And then I've got enough oil in there, and it got to the places it needed to go to be able to like really soak that dry tissue and warm it up and get it more lubricated, you know? So if you're getting a little relief from oil, imagine if you start snorting a whole bunch. And you could do that a good 3 times a day. And, you know, maybe for a week or so, and then it should start healing, where you just need to do that maybe once a day because of where you live. Like I would be doing oil snorts when I lived in Albuquerque. That was a game changer for me. You know, living in that dry climate, you need that oil in there on the regular. Okay, the other one I would think about is like a really nourishing steam inhalation. And then we'll make this into a system. So steam inhalation, you're going to get moisture in there. I love linden flowers. They are super juicy and nourishing. But to be honest, you could use licorice. You could use comfrey. You could use calendula. You could use electrolyte, gray salt, and do an electrolyte because it's for, you know, building and cooling down tissue. You could do seaweed. So these are all the things you could add to your water, and you boil your water, and the more fragile the leaf or flower is, right, then you put it in right before you do your steam. And if you're using a root like ginger, you know, or marshmallow root that's really nourishing, well, then you're going to put it in a little sooner and give it a boil. But steam inhalations are going to hydrate everything. It's a great way to get some of those nourishing, you know, plants in there. You know, and if you do think you had mold exposure, there's plants you could put in there that would be very specific, like red root and yerba mansa, you know. So these are some ideas, but let's put this into a system now. So the system goes steam inhalation. You boil your water, do your herbs, do a steam. The reason we start with that steam is because right there, you're going to put a towel over your head and you're going to go inward, and you're going to just open up all the channels, and you're going to liquefy all of the tissues and open everything up. And then, you know, that's going to be the first nourishing. Then we're going to go in and we're going to do the neti pot. So then we do the neti pot, and neti pot is a very specific thing. You want to keep it cycling in your upper channel, which means you breathe through your mouth the whole time. And that's the way you just make sure that it's really running through and clearing this out. So we warmed it up with the steam. Now you clear it out and use good salt, you know, use good gray salt so you get electrolytes in there. You're actually getting hydrated, right? If you're not using the right salt, it's going to dry you out more. Then you can do the salt snort, the oil snort, and you will do that nausea. And then you've left it all lubricated. You opened it up, you cleared it out, and you lubed it up. And I think you just need a little system that you do. And you could do that 2 times a day until this is really remedied. And eventually you shouldn't have to do it more than once a day. And even maybe every couple days will become your normal. And then I'm just going to give you a little bit more advice, and maybe Andrea, you could, you know, throw up some examples there, but I just want to talk about true hydration. So we're talking about hydration in your upper channels, but how did that get dry? It could have been the environment, like just crazy cold outside. But probably, why did not everybody get that every day? You know, why is not everyone doing that? So you're probably too dry in your system. So it takes me back to like gray salt, magnesium rich electrolytes. And it takes me to essential fatty acids. Like get a beautiful, I'll give you the most general one everyone needs, which is like the, you know, flax and borage oil. You know, Barlean's makes a beautiful flax and borage oil. You can find it in any health food store. You need a good 6 tablespoons a day. So salad dressing, put it on your food, lose it in a pesto, just don't cook with it. And then probiotics. And because that's going to be the seat of hydration. The seat of hydration is the flora and the lubrication and the hydration of our gut, so that we have enough liquid to compost our food and to turn our food to liquid, and then to get that liquid out to our tissues, right? And this is all tissue in here. So really, I would think about your Trina hydration, and actually we have a really, what, $5.99 ebook, right? We have a Trina.
Yeah.
That might be the simplest way to just like why salt and explaining that and all these details. But I'd say internal hydration, being able to assimilate and absorb water, and having your hydration of the gut are really, really precious for somebody who lives in the desert or, lives high elevation, So those are just going to be your daily long-term, because you live in a dry place. You got to stay wet, just like here, people have to keep things cleared out of their system a little bit more, because there's just so much mold here, and there's so much moisture coming off that's with grapes that are sprayed. So we have like thick air, and then it's carrying, sprayed grapes. That's why I live way out Occidental. So I'm beyond all the grapes. I'm like, I don't want to live in grape land, but I do anyways. Right. But it is one of the issues we have. And where you are in Colorado, it's just dang dry. And then you put cold with it and things crack open and get irritated. So warm and wet. That's everything you need.
I wish I had known about the Trine of hydration when I lived in Chicago. Winters were miserable, dry and cold. So yeah, that's so important to hydrate the whole system.
That's so interesting. I don't think of Chicago as dry.
In the winter, woo!
Because of the cold, because it's so...
Yeah, and heat, and you're going back and forth, outside, inside,
Yeah.
All right, so our next question is sort of related, same ear, nose, throat situation, and it comes from Kim. Kim's best friend has tinnitus in both ears from years of construction work without ear protection. He uses white noise to help sleep, but would like to learn how to reduce volume and rates of the tinnitus occurrence. Wonders if you have any insight around herbal teas or ear rinses or exercises related to that.
Okay. So, first thing I think of is this wonderful man that Scott used to work for when we first got together 25 years ago. He worked for this man who could not hear very well, but when a big, huge truck went by and there was a big rumble or a pounding, he would just be like, ah, and he'd get this like pain, the screeching sounds and pain in his ears. And so, there was just this whole, I just saw him always doing this, like, little thing where he's like, I can't take it. And I was like, what's going on? And anyways, he was in a war and a bomb, affected his ears. And so he had damage. And I made him this formula, and I have given it to so many people since, and this is my first remedy, right? So I just took sesame oil, okay? Cold pressed, unrefined, not roasted sesame, right? We don't want to be putting that anywhere in our orifices. And you get that nice, good cold pressed sesame. I did a 4 ounce. And in that 4 ounces of sesame, you're going to add, now this is an expensive oil, but this is what I made him. It's helichrysum italicum. And it's the essential oil of helichrysum. And I can give you a cheaper variety too, but it's helichrysum and vetiver. Okay. And vetiver is coos grass. It's a grass that just grows, and it's really all those mats, those grass mats you see at so many doorways all over the world are made out of vetiver. So they're used for thresholds in doorways. So helichrysum italicum and vetiver are your 2 plants. And you do 10 drops of helichrysum, so you don't need very much. You can even get like a little 2 ml of helichrysum. And then you're going to do 40 drops of vetiver. Okay. And that goes in the 4 ounce. And then I had him doing 2 things with that. because the eustachian tube in your ears are connected in through your mouth. So I had him doing oil pulling in the mouth, and I had him like really swishing and gargling back towards the ear. And he had some dental issues too. So there was another reason we were doing that. And then I had him putting that oil in his ears. Now, the only thing about putting oil in your ears is I actually did ear candling on him, and I cleared out his ears before we started doing the oil. So how did I know? Because I said, how much wax do you get? And the more wax you create in your ears, the more you could have a clog. And then you don't want to be putting a bunch of oil down in there. It's not going to hurt you. It's not like water on the ear, which is extremely painful. Oil doesn't do that. Eventually you're going to absorb it, so it's not going to be some long-term issue. But it is not fun to have oil clogged in your ear and you're waiting a couple days for it to like absorb. So you just want to start with like one drop. And just, did it feel good? Did you feel it drip down to the eustachian tube? Like, was there some follow through? Can you hear the same? Well, then tonight you could let me try 2 drops, So we never do more than 6 drops, but you always start with 1 and work your way up, and you make sure the channel's open. And the other thing is you want to tilt your head and you want to pull your ear up. Come here, you. I always think of that. Come here, you little kid. So I'm going to pull up my own little kid here. Come here. And it elongates the eardrum to the eustachian tube. So it really does do something. So sometimes I'll even like pull this way, and then I'll put my drops in. And then you want to massage, and you want to put your fingers one to the back and one to the front, and you want to massage. And you want to open everything up, and then you want to pull your ear middle down, and you want to get onto your jaw. And then you always tilt to the side and make sure it pops and releases any excess oil. Then you can do the other ear. But you never want to do the one ear until this ear is clear and popped. And if this one gets clogged, do not do the other one. It just is annoying and you won't be able to hear anything. Again, it won't hurt you, but it won't be fun. But really, the vetiver and the helichrysum. And then the other thing that I have done with many people is you could just start with the vetiver, because I have seen it do wonders. And I've also used it with Palma rosa. Palma rosa is way, way cheaper, and it's for nerve damage. It's way cheaper than helichrysum, and you would do 40 drops Palma rosa, and you would do 40 drops vetiver in that 4 ounce of sesame. So your dosage is going to be different. The Palma rosa and the vetiver would go longer if you're wanting to save money. And I've also had it where people just buy vetiver and they just put, more like 60 drops in that 4 ounce, and they just start with one plant. And the other thing you can do with vetiver is you can put a couple drops. It's like a resin. You can put a couple drops in your hand, and you can actually just smear it in your ears, and around, and let yourself just get, a deeper transdermal experience with just the plant on its own. And it's very safe. It can go straight on your skin. It can go on there multiple times a day. And since it's a resin, only a percentage of it is getting into your bloodstream, just so you know, which is different with other essential oils that go all to your bloodstream. So you can really play with that vetiver. People smear it on their third eye, so they stay in their sacred for the day. And they put the vetiver and smear it on their heart. That might be really good for the breast emotional question. But yeah, vetiver is the go-to if I had to pick one plant for hearing loss and tinnitus, either. That's the one I would go for. Tinnitus is a ringing in the ear. Ringing in the ear in Ayurveda is vata, and they say your glass is empty. So here we are back to hydration, but come on, like water's everything. If it's everything in the world, it's everything in the body. We're the same percentage. So water is literally the most sacred thing that we could be trying to preserve in ourselves, not just in the world. And so we're back to hydration, because if you don't, if you were a full glass, this would be calm and it would be buffered and it would be lubricated and there wouldn't be a ring. But the fact that somebody gets dehydrated, which is two vata, right? Ether and air, wind hits your face over and over, you're bound to get chapped. So ether and air make cold and dry. And if you get too cold, blood pressure low, or if you get too dry, your glass is emptying. And that means everything up here is not staying lubricated and juicy. So you can add the juice, oil, you can clear the channel and see if there's obstructions in there, like an ear candling. But for the most part, I bet there's an underlining, trying to hydration needs to be established and filling up that glass while you're learning how to fill up your ear without clogging it. So that's the problem with doing too much ear oil, like you might hit a wall and be like, it's starting to clog up. It's not dripping as much. I'm 2 weeks in. Well, then you'd want to stop putting it in your ear for a moment, maybe even a week. And then you could just take that oil and you could do, massage, use a gua sha, and you can massage into your jaw. You could open up your channels and you could get behind your ear. It feels so good to massage your ear anyway. You know what I mean? And yeah, that is really helichrysum, Palma rosa, vetiver are my plants of choice, along with sesame oil. And I feel like if you get in the zone of doing that, that's gonna make a big difference.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from Martha, who's here. She received her breast cream this week and she loves it. And also, she picked up some pettigrain and gingergrass and wonders if you could give some more insights on how to use those two.
Well, guess what? I saw that order. I was like, when was the last time somebody ordered pettigrain? I did. I was like, wow, I don't know if she knows exactly what she's doing with that pettigrain. She was like, I can't believe I found it. You know what I mean? Or if it was kind of a like, what a cool name. I wonder what that is. I'll try it. And I had this thought. So talk about pettigrain. So I don't know if my label gives you the specific detail, and I should change it if it doesn't, but there's lemon, lime, and orange pettigrain. Sometimes you can find bergamot pettigrain. It used to be all the rage. Now I can't find it. And it was brilliant. Mine is made from a lemon. It's a lemon pettigrain. Okay. So that's the first thing to know. And so first off, that's lemon rind or lime rind. So that's what pettigrain is. It's the rind alone from that fruit. And not the rind. That's what we get lemon and lime from. It's the leaf. It's the green leaf of that citrus. So you're getting literally like orange leaf, Now I have pettigrain. I'll tell you all about it. I use a lot of pettigrain, and I'm super attached to pettigrain because I grew up in my grandma's lemon tree. And it was just this huge, beautiful lemon tree that just was so easy to climb. And I literally lived in that tree. And I remember the smell of lemons, and I ate so many of those, but it was the smell of that green leaf. And if you ever notice, if you go by a citrus tree, there's this very green, citrusy green, fresh smell that is like no other smell. And that is pettigrain in the bottle. So that is lemon leaf is what that's made out of. So then why would we use that? Well, first off, I don't even think I sell lemon. I don't use a lot of lemon essential oil because it's really irritant. It's super hot. It's super dry, and it's super astringent. So it's hard on the kidneys. But pettigrain does not have that same chemistry. And it's a terpene. It's a terpene alcohol, and terpenes are your largest group of chemical compounds that are flushing and cleansing and active and just really getting a move on. So pettigrain is most known for someone who is maybe poor circulation or low metabolism. The more kapha or the more wet you have, the more petitgrain can help you. And one of its main things and why I use so much of it is it's incredible in salt scrubs and in abiango oils, daily oilination, because it just smells like, what is that? I know that smell, but I don't know that smell. And it moves the lymph like nobody's business. Really good for lymphatic drainage. So people with edema, which is water trapped in their tissue, petitgrain I'm all over it. Like, it works so good. And you could use about 10 drops a day and then just use less of that petitgrain as you go, because it is a little bit of a drier plant. So you don't want to dry yourself out. You don't want to overuse it. And it's almost always paired with florals in the perfumery world. So that's just a side note. But, like one of the prized ingredients in this amazing floral old vintage parfum is called Quelques Fleurs, right? Quelques Fleurs. It's a very, very precious perfume and just beautiful. And one of the kind of secret ingredients, or like the prized ingredients in there, is that nice little clean, kind of row that's around these flowers that are very ooh. And they pick that petitgrain just to be like, oh. And you can really smell it in there. It's just got this little top note, as they call it. It's one of the prized, petitgrain is one of the prized top notes in the world of perfumery. And it's often a secret ingredient. And it's very inexpensive, So yeah, that's petitgrain. But lymphatic drainage, that's really why I use so much of it. Yeah. And then what was the other plant? Was it lemongrass?
Gingergrass.
Oh, gingergrass. Oh, I love gingergrass. And that is not an easy plant to find. So gingergrass is not from ginger just as we know it. It looks a lot like lemongrass when it grows. And by the way, Palma rosa I was talking about, it looks just like a lemongrass too. And it has a real citrusy green finish also. And that gingergrass is like this grass that grows all over. Like, where I've seen it mostly is like Thailand. And I remember seeing a lot of it growing in Hong Kong when I was there. I was like, wow, it's everywhere. But it just, yes, ginger and citrus and green, because it's one of those sticky kind of resinous leaves, grasses. It's a grass, right? So really just this special smell. People love that stuff. Now, I use gingergrass along with Himalayan cedarwood and cypress, not blue cypress, cypress. Those are my 3 number 1 plants I use for scar tissue and for breaking up scar tissue. Himalayan cedar, gingergrass, and cypress. I've been using cypress for years, but it doesn't always have enough heat to kind of like melt, because scar tissue, you're like wanting to melt it and help it to like break up its bound up fibers, and you're wanting to help it to unbind and smooth out. And that's where gingergrass, it's actually warming. And if you were going to put it on your skin every single day, you would want to dilute it, like just a little bit of oil. You could put it clean on your skin once or twice, but it's warm enough where it might turn you a little red, so keep that in mind. But blood building, heart tonic, lung cleansing, and breaking up scar tissue. Those are some of the things that gingergrass just really are incredibly good at. And I remembered one day, and I actually, I like taking just like, I'll put a little salve, like I'll put a little bit of that breast cream on my hand, and then I'll put like 6 drops of gingergrass, and then I rub that on my chest. And then I make a cup of tea. And there's something about that, because I can't put the gingergrass in the tea, the essential oil in the tea. But there's something about having that gingergrass on me and then drinking like a cardamom tulsi tea. And it's just this incredible combination of just like ginger and grassy and citrusy. And it's very refreshing. And it, I have not done any clinical studies on this, but I would go so far as to say, I really feel like gingergrass just uplifts people's spirits. Like I could see using it in depression blends, and grief blends, because it just has this like exotic, refreshing, warming, inviting, and you're kind of like, who are you? And we use it a fair amount in our steam room with the Linsea cubeba, which is the Chinese lemongrass. But we use it a fair amount in that steam room, especially in the winters, because it's a little warmer than that lemongrass. So yeah, I could talk a lot about both of those plants that you got. I thought they were very interesting, purchases. And I was kind of like, this person, Martha, you either know about essential oils and you were like, oh my gosh, I can't find these anywhere. Or you were just trusting your instincts and you picked up some good plants. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say if you have a little bit of wet, if you run a little bit more wet or a little bit more cold, you pick two plants that are like perfect for helping you get a little bit of a move on. If you run a little dry, you need to be just a little careful with how much of that petitgrain you use. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Our next questions actually come from Kyra, and she has two questions to ask you. One is specific and one's broader. The first question is that she has a 2-centimeter cyst in spinoglenoid notch in her shoulder from an MRI. Okay. Has been doing physical therapy and is going to be evaluated by an orthopedic surgeon, but would prefer to avoid surgery. Wonders if there's any advice.
Okay. Well, that's a lot like having a bursa in your hip. It's like a cyst that's in your socket, and along the bone line. And so first off, I just want to say those hurt. So, maybe yours doesn't, but I just want to give a shout out to like those usually are kind of painful. And then there's a go-to for anything cystic. So it'd be the first place I'd start, which is a plant, Kyra, that I know, frankincense. So it would be the first place I would start, because the cyst needs two things. It's an internal boil that is encapsulated. Now, if it's hardened, it's going to be a lot harder to change that cyst without surgery. But if it's new enough where it's still liquid or like a pocket of fluid, and usually they can tell you from your labs, from your, tests, but if it's still fluid, frankincense is astringent and it's bitter. And so it'll actually pull that fluid out and it'll reduce that tissue down and it'll close up that pocket. So it's an anti-inflammatory and it's a skin tonic. So frankincense is everything that you want to bind together and get really strong and heal. So we use it for leaky gut. We use it for open wounds. We use it for hemorrhoids, and definitely cysts. It's the go-to. And there's nothing hormonal in there. Cysts often are either perpetuated by coffee or an allergen or chocolate or nuts. These are things that just will create more inflammation in the body if there already is inflammation. So they're considered like irritants. So you could, do some of these things. And I know those are not foods that you normally eat. I know your diet and I know how incredibly good it is too. You're an inspiration to me, actually. But I would say that would be my first go-to. And I would probably do 10 drops of frankincense a day. And then there's one that's a little more nourishing because I think you run a little bit dry. Frankincense is a little dry. The other one would be blue cypress or Roman chamomile. Because who knows what you have in your cupboard? Lavender would be a good way to start, but it's only probably going to get you so far with a cyst. But I would say either, and chamomile, you'd be doing maybe 4 drops a day, max, and if you were doing blue cypress, you'd probably need to do a little bit more, like 12 to 20 drops a day. So you're going to have to do a higher dose, but man, does that blue cypress with the, blue cypress, it's literally blue. And that's because of its chemistry called osulene from the sesquiterpene family, the most anti-inflammatory chemical group we have. the sesquiterpenes. That's a good name for a band. The sesquiterpenes. They'd be very chill.
Yeah.
But the blue cypress is going to heal the tissue, and it's going to reduce the inflammation in the tissue, and it has that same binding it together, but it's a little more juicy. It's a little wetter. So if you think about it, you could do, frankincense, blue cypress, and chamomile together and make a little formula, or you could see which one of those plants are really calling you. And to be honest, which one's in your cupboard, and you can just get started and see if it's feeling right. That'd be the thing I'd think about. The other thing is, and I'm trying to think about how to say this without this, I don't know, even being, a little incriminating or something, but cysts are like internal boils. So we don't just want to harden them. We don't want to just let them sit. Usually there are things where you want to do repetitive, like say it's back here, you're going to want to do repetitive, or like get a tennis ball on it. And yes, it'll hurt a little. So don't go, productive pain only, but you are going to want to soften the cyst, and you're going to want to weaken the perimeters of the cyst so that eventually, but so slowly, you are getting that cyst to drain. And that means your tissue and your interstitial tissue will absorb it, but we know with cysts that if you just reduce it down, it can fill back up. So if it's a pocket, that pocket needs to drain, so that you really end up not just having another cyst appear in the same place. And that's why cysts are repetitive, like in the breast for women, or, a cyst that keeps showing up in the groin, or under the neck. These are really common spots that are just reoccurring because you reduce the inflammation, but you didn't change the pocket being able to fill back up. But that's a little bit more information, that is information I know Kyra can handle, and is good information for who she is and her maturity level of knowing how to take care of the human body and herself. But, you'd want to be very careful with that idea of just like, if you're someone who pushes yourself too far in pain, you need to back off and be patient and just slowly soften the perimeters a little bit every single day, and making sure you're feeling better. You're not feeling flared, right? So the point is to, soften the perimeters, but don't flare the cyst itself. So that would be some of my go-tos for that. Depending on how thick that cyst has gotten, like who knows how long that thing has been there, you know what I mean? Sometimes they're hidden and you don't know they're there, and they've already hardened. So what if you have a hard cyst? Well, I'd use blue cypress or chamomile. I would not be using the frankincense. And the other thing is, if it's a hard cyst, then you want to treat it like scar tissue, which means it's got to get warm and it's got to break up, and you got to loosen all those fibers up. So you're softening the cyst versus reducing inflammation. And now we're back to the ginger grass. Now we're back to the Himalayan cedar. And cypress. And actually cypress is probably the go-to for this, because not only is it good for scar tissue, but I've used cypress with a lot of hardened cysts and a lot of like cystic activity, because it's a reproductive tonic and regulator. So I've used a lot of cypress with cysts in the breast for sure. So that might be a really good one, cypress with the frankincense.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Good combo. Yeah. So
All right. And
with the cyst, we always have to think about how old is it? It's a good question for anybody. And how hard it is tells you how old it is. What's another question you got there, Andrea?
all right. And Kyra's second question today is for a client. Kyra would love to hear the Ayurvedic take on trauma, psychological and physical trauma events, and resolving and healing trauma history so that it's not getting played out in current relating.
Okay, so first things first, trauma causes patterns, experiences. Negative experiences are trauma. Okay, so we have all kinds of experiences. Everything starts with how you experience something. And when it's a negative experience, it becomes a physical manifestation. There's a physicality to it. It's not just something that's happening outside of me, you're affected. So emotions meet the physical. And then that trauma, that experience, it's trapped in the physical. Often I talk about it like what got under your skin. You know what I mean? Because we use that languaging, and then people are like, yeah, that did get under my skin. I'm like, and we can pull it out from under your skin. You know, we can tease that physical part of it out. And it's what they call the visceral knowing. So your muscles responded in a certain way, however that was. So you don't want to just have to rehash the whole trauma, but you are going to have to go back to it enough to say, how did I start holding my body? Or how did I start responding in the world? Or did I go hide? Or did I become more, outlandish? Or where did I go? And that's the beginning of your pattern. So it's not just the trauma, it's how you experienced it, where it got stored, and how it affected you physically. And then now, how are you walking in the world with that? And then the more you're walking with it, the more you're making decisions according to the trauma, the more we get patterns. Patterns get created. So the other thing that I love about Ayurveda is this idea of not only can you look at how you experienced it and think about where you're holding it in your body, and you can start unwinding it through, body work and, posture and breath, but they also look at this idea that if you have a pattern, it means you did something the same. You kept doing the same thing. That's what a pattern is. So if you want to unwind a pattern from like when you're 9 years old, and you're 52 or something, you're going to have to not just go back and dig. You're going to have to change the pattern on the daily. You have to do the opposite. So we're back to the drawing board of like hot needs cold and cold needs hot and wet needs dry and dry needs wet. But literally they see it as that clean and simple so that you can really cut to the chase of like, how am I going to unwind this trauma? Well, you're going to do the opposite. And it's probably going to be as many times as you did the pattern. So you unwind the pattern by doing the opposite of the pattern. And that is hard in itself. Think about how you might know you have a pattern right now and you know where it came from. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh man, I gotta do something else with it. Like I gotta what? So it's like, if it made you defensive, or angry, then how are you not going to step into anger or defensive? If it made you feel like you have to explain yourself, how are you going to not explain yourself? If it made you go hide, and so you don't let anyone know where you're at because that feels safer, how are you going to start letting people know where you're at? So whatever the pattern is, what would be the opposite expression? And you're going to have to do that over and over and over to unwind the pattern. And then we can only talk about our traumas so long. Eventually, we have to realize it became visceral, it became physical, and we have to be willing to, like, as you know, Kyra, but we got to be willing to pick up that gua sha, my sacred knife, not its traditional name in Chinese medicine, right? Gua sha is Chinese, to scrape, to let out toxins. Well, that stuff was toxic. That trauma was toxic. I'm going to cord cutter. That's my sacred knife. I'm going to cord cutter. I'm going to scrape that stuff off me. I'm going to slough that off me. And I'm going to make sure I'm getting from under my skin. It is my right to move that out of my body and further away from my physical self. But I'm going to have to do things opposite. If it became an eating, I'm going to have to change the way I eat. If it became a way of expressing, I'm going to have to change the way I express. And, this is really cellular structure 101, like the beginning, like they talk about the experience actually happens in the cell. And that cell mimics majority. You know, I know I've talked about this many times, but it's such a fascinating conversation on the fact that our cells mimic majority. If your cells are holding trauma and the pattern is the majority, all of the cells you make are also holding that majority because we mimic. If that's depleted, we're making depleted cells. We're no longer making plump, juicy cells if that's the majority. And when we have plump, juicy cells and we start doing opposite experiences, and it means going out on a limb, right? We're talking about like going out on a limb, you know, like putting your safety on the edge, like, oh, do it different. I'm so comfortable here, even though, you know, I get mad, but I'm still so comfortable because at least I know that. You know what I mean? And then it's like, yeah, but is that working? So how do I turn that into humor? How do I turn that into like, you know, the opposite? And then I'm trying to mimic the majority of more healthy cells versus more trauma cells. So it takes a while. I mean, I think some traumas, we know trauma happens and it's historical and your history's going nowhere. It really is now. I mean, I think about traumas, I'm like, well, they're not going anywhere. It's about what am I going to do with it as I walk through life? Like, I'm not going to forget that happened, that I'm not going to be able to forget that I was deeply affected, you know, or even violated or whatever. But how am I going to still trust that I can walk in the world in a different way and that's not going to define me? So I often talk to people about that. And I know in Ayurveda, they talk about like stay objective to the object, which means don't make your trauma your identity. And sometimes we keep it our identity because we keep talking about it. You know, we just keep putting it out there. You meet someone new and there's the trauma story. You meet somebody else and there's the trauma story. You get in a situation with a, you know, intimate person that you know, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's from the trauma, you know, but you're taking yourself back to the negative, you know? So it's not like I'm not trying to say don't talk about it. It's just you can only talk about it so long before it has to be physically unwound. And I like that idea in Ayurveda. They're like, okay, you had an experience. It was hard to stay objective. You were affected. So without that objectivity and without being able to stay in the witness, it got to you. And then now we eat our emotion. We consume our emotion. Our emotion then goes out from the gut, and that experience goes out and feeds to the lymph, to the blood, to the muscles, to the skin, to the bones, to the nerves, to the reproductive, to the glandular. And then we start having a whole conversation around experience, consumption, and feeding out to our tissues and who we are and what we look like. And so, you know, we can also track it that way. Like you can only talk about the experience so long before you have to change the consumption of it and the expression of it. Yep. So
that is an amazing way to think about it. All right, we have one more question. This comes from Leslie, who said she recently attended your pelvic floor class and loved it. She thanks you very much for that. Her kids were diagnosed with leaky gut and autoimmune encephalitis. It mostly presents as behavior issues. They're being treated by medical providers, but Leslie's wondering how she can support them at home.
Okay. So, well, there's two things to look at, and they are connected: leaky gut and our immunity. Okay. So our immune system is our lymphatic system. And one thing y'all could do, I don't know how old your kids are, but, you know, I do have, you know, my lymphatic care, you know, webinar that I think would be a really good go-to, like knowing how your river of life and how simple the lymph really is as a system, how simple the immune system is, and how much you can do with your own hands and your own tools. So I just want to give a huge shout out to, like, kids love salt scrubs. You put a big old sheet on the ground, so you don't have to worry about the mess so much in the bathroom, and you just scrub each other down, or they scrub themselves down, and you turn all pink and you get that lymph and that blood flowing. So the lymph is a river. Rivers need to flow. And when they're not flowing, they need river restoration. And that's really my baseline of lymphatic care is like, how's your river and where does it need to be restored? And so, it's very easy to say autoimmune disorder at this point, because it means your immune system's doing this here, and then it's tired over here, and it's flared here, and it's exhausted over there. And then it's like, well, auto mode. But really, rivers want to flow. And this river flows one direction. So it's not even that hard. And there's tons of things that you could do with your kids. Like you could all do salt scrubs together. You could do oilination abhyanga together. You could dry brush. You could gua sha. You could breathe. You could dance. You could laugh. You could take a walk. These are all things that literally move the lymph, your immune system. Yeah. I just gave you the best medicine for your kids ever. Dance and laugh. And you're moving your lymph, and it's true. So there's that part of it, and a lot of things you could explore there with lymphatic tools and education. The other part is the leaky gut. So the leaky gut for children, it's not super easy for kids to get leaky gut. So it just makes me, want to ask a couple questions, and I do this out of complete respect and trying to help you figure things out. But I'm wondering about chemicals in the household, because chemicals in children, with the amount of chemicals out in the world, more chemicals in a home, really rips up the gut, and that's even from airborne. So I'm just kind of wondering about, chemicals and that makes me think about, just like the other way kids get leaky gut is heavy metals. So just, do you live around industry, or could there be anything in the soil that you're growing your food in? If you are, you know what I mean? Just some things, or, lead paint in an old house. But there are things where I would want to figure out, how's this leaky gut happening? And the other way children can get leaky gut is allergies. So there could be some food allergens, or there could be more, and it's hard to even control children in their diets. Maybe it's, what I mean? Like, how do you do that? I don't know. I don't have a kid. So, I mean, that part of it looks so hard. I'm going to be really honest. But how do you get them to eat more protein and get more, food that is medicine and less sugar? So there is a sugar picture with leaky gut for sure. If it's not like heavy metals or, something of that sort. And then the other thing I'm wondering is, what if they don't have, just a question, but what if they don't actually have full blown actual leaky gut? A lot of times a doctor or practitioners will use that languaging very loosely. Like leaky gut means like things are leaking out in the gut and they're not like getting everywhere they need to go efficiently. And that's different than like looking up leaky gut as a disorder, which is like a big deal. That means like toxins are getting out into the blood, and there's perforations, and there's like bleeding out of the intestines. I'm just wondering, like, really? Both your kids have leaky gut? I'm surprised. So you might also want to just like reframe it if you think that was just a concept more than a disease or disorder. So then you want to reframe it and be like, leaky gut is dry and hot. So everything you need in food is alkaline, cooling, buckets of water, put a fire out. And they also hydrate tissue that's dry. So you need nourishing, lubricating, hydrating, alkaline, cooling, wet. Those are just like everything that an intestine that is dry and hot and perforated and leaking and unhappy. That's everything it needs to heal. So I think aloe vera. I do use aloe vera, and you want to get what's called aloin free, or sometimes it'll say inner fillet. You don't want gel, you don't want leaf. You want the inner pulp, the inner fillet. And if you get aloe in that form, a kid under the age of 10, I would say can easily do, 1/8 of a cup of aloe every night before bed. You could put some pomegranate juice in there or a little cherry juice in there, both good for leaky gut. But, Because the aloe, may not taste exactly great, but you could probably lose it enough. And you'll find a way to get it in there, I think. Sometimes I've even said, I'm like, well, does your child do like, bubbly water? If they don't drink soda, do they do bubble water? Oh yeah, they love carbonated water. I'm like, well, put a little carbonated water in with that aloe is not going to hurt it. And then add some pomegranate juice, and you just made a pomegranate spritzer for your kid. You don't have to say there's aloe in it. You know what I mean? And they're like, ooh, how cool. So play, depending on age. Above 10, easy, half a cup a day, fourth a cup, just to start easy, but even a half a cup. All the aloe on the market is diluted anyway. So, you're not getting just that intense, pure concentrate. So you have a little room, but it is safe for kids because it's not with the leaf. The leaf is laxative and it's an irritant, if overused. And that's why we're doing, not the aloe gel leaf. But that is a great thing to cool down, calm down, and lubricate. I mean, aloe is like a bucket of water for your gut and liver. Seriously, that's exactly how I think of my aloe. It's just like this beautiful bucket of water that's like cooling down and just like hydrating everything and calming it down. That would be my go-to. And cilantro. Excuse me. Cilantro pesto could be a fun thing for the kids to make. And, they get to see it turn green in the process. And sorry, leave the garlic, leave the garlic out, leave the cheese out, and maybe make it with tahini if you want it creamy. So cilantro and tahini and lemon and olive oil and some good salt. And they get to make their pesto. And guess what? If they make it, and if you give them a little label to make their label on their jar, and then they get to label their jar, they're going to eat it. It changes everything. So you just have to have them interact with their medicine in a playful way, But yeah, those are some of the things I think of. And, but I still have that little bit of wondering of just like, where this leaky gut came from, or maybe there's autoimmune disorders in your family. And so it's something that they're going to have to know about their lymph system for their life. People who are there's hundreds of autoimmune disorders and there's millions of people living with them. So, maybe it's part of in the family and genetics. Even more important to know that the things we're talking about right now probably aren't just for a little while. They're more like a lifestyle, to stay healthy. Yeah.
All right. Well, another fantastic Thursday morning. This has been a super double header with Elise and now here. Thank you, everybody who's joined us today. Lots of classes are coming up, so make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and definitely, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, please do hit subscribe and make sure that you're getting notified when we are live so that you can join us and ask DeAnna your questions whenever you have them. Feel free to email us at info@deannacenter.com. If you've got a question that you think of somewhere along the weeks, we will be back here again at 9, 2 Thursdays from now. So we'll be back to our normal time. Tell a friend, bring them in. Otherwise, this recording will be here for you to pop back in. We had so many good suggestions. But please do go out and have a wonderful day. Anything you want to add, DeAnna?
I guess I would just add, remember, we're in the last little stretch of hibernation of winter. So, don't spring into spring too quickly. We actually need water and we need a little bit more wet, cold. We need that. And it's not looking like it's in the forecast. So we all need to kind of, like I say, when the fires are around here, we got to make a big old wet bubble around our community. This is a good time to want still a little bit of winter. We still have a month to go, And we want to remember that. If we want to spring forward too quickly, we're actually not sitting in the proper timing of our seasons. And we're actually going to dry out quicker in the year. And none of us can afford that anywhere in the world or in our bodies. So please sit in the wet, cold hibernation, ponder, think about what you want to achieve, and just wait a moment before you do any deep springing forward. Just watch all these cute little buds and leaves starting to like meet the sun, but don't try to meet with them. Just watch from afar a little bit longer. And then by the time we get a month out, we can really meet the size of those little springs, the little shoots that are just starting. Right now, we want to watch it and let them shine, and I just like to think about that. So people are so quick to get out of winter, you know what I mean? And I'm always like, you know what? That's not going to be great in summer. So I don't want to be quick to get out of winter right now. I want more rain.
All right. So that's it. Keep it cozy.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.